All right, welcome to 150 Years of Love and Hate in Greer, South Carolina. I'm going to open by saying this. At this time yesterday, I was in Reno, Nevada, and my dad's on hospice. I took an emergency trip out to help him. Red eye back. I am not sure I am sentient right now. So put up with me, please, and let's get going here. In 1869, a little baby boy was born. Of course he was a baby. He was born, a boy, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and he was named Charlie. Charlie grew up in Gettysburg, and he was the kind of kid who loved technology. You know, this was the Industrial Revolution had produced all kinds of marvels, and he loved them all. And he ran across someone in Gettysburg that had a marvel, a camera. That person was W.H. Tipton. Tipton was a famous Civil War battlefield photographer. He's famous for something. Some of you may have read about him. He is famous for hiring live people to go out and lay on the battlefield like corpses and taking pictures of the battlefield. There are Civil War battle photographs that Tipton took showing hundreds of dead bodies that were taken 10 years after the battles. Okay, so Charlie, this little boy, meets Tipton and is fascinated by his camera and wants to learn all about it, and Tipton makes him his apprentice. So Charlie learns the trade. He learns photography, and as he gets closer to adulthood, he says, this is what I want to do. I want to be a photographer. And so he saves up money until he can buy his own camera, and then till he can buy his own developing supplies. And at the age of 21, he packs it all up, and he boards the Southern Railway in Gettysburg, and he takes a train ride down the tracks to another small town. He gets out and he goes on sales day. Sales day was the first Monday of a month when everyone would come into the town square and buy and trade and barter. And so on sales day, he goes to a new town and he sets up and he takes pictures. And when that town has bought pictures, he closes up shop and boards the train and heads to the next town. He becomes an itinerant photographer. And he works his way down the Southern Railway, down the East Coast, stopping at every stop, getting off, taking pictures for as long as the town had money and need for pictures, and then going to the next town. And he makes his way down to Greer's Depot. And in Greer's Depot, it was almost certain that he landed here on a sales day, and he got off, if you can imagine, not where the depot is now. That was the town square. And on the south side of the town square was a little wooden depot. He would have stepped off onto a platform and looked at our town square, and the townspeople were coming out to buy and trade and sell things. And Charlie got out and set up his camera and started hawking photographs. Now, his intention was very much to pack up and go to the next town. But what he didn't know was that walking up to him that day was, that's Charlie, sorry. See, I'm a little off my game. Charlie, age 24, is the age he is when he comes to Greer. Walking up to him that day is this young woman named Fannie Miller. She's 21, and she is a beauty. Right behind us is Miller Street, named after her father. And Charlie never left Greer. He marries Fannie, and they build a house on what is now Drace Street, because this is Charlie Drace. And we have Charlie Drace's studio up here. Charlie Drace became Greer's photographer, and we know so much about the history of Greer through his photographs. And they had 4 children here. The first is barely visible in the carriage. There is Pearl. And Charlie Drace was one of our early town leaders, and he stopped here because he met the love of his life here. In 1954, let's fast forward, In 1954, Shirley Ann is a 16-year-old girl living in Greer, and her mother is renting out an upstairs bedroom to make a little extra money. And Shirley Ann comes home from school one day. She's 16 and she goes to supper, and her mother introduces, we have a new boarder. It's a 28-year-old man named John. And they sit down and are eating supper, and Shirley says in her mind, I'm going to marry this man. Shirley Ann told me herself, and I will tell you what she told me. She said, that night, after everyone went to bed, I slipped out of my room and very quietly went up the steps and went into John's room. And she said, I seduced him. Okay, kids, that means she made a persuasive argument that he should marry her, right? And they got married. And they were deeply committed for the rest of their lives. 30 years after getting married, Shirley Ann ran for mayor of the city of Greer, and she became Greer's first and only female mayor we've ever had. Some of you have met Shirley Ann Rollins, and she is a hoot. So welcome to 150 years of love and hate in Greer. There's a lot I could talk about. You know, I go back and I look in the history of things, and one of the first problems is you have to find a mate, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that topic today, but I ran across one thing that was very common here in the South, and even recently has been common. In fact, there was a woman in the audience at 10 o'clock this morning who did this very thing and told the crowd what it was. They would take an apple and peel it in a long spiral slice. Does anyone know what they would do with it? Does anyone know? I think she knows. She's doing it. You would throw it over your shoulder, and you would look at how it landed and see if it made the shape of a letter, which would be the initial of the person that you were destined to be married to. A little bit of a combination of divination and superstition. But once you identified a person that you were really attracted to, you would want to pursue a relationship with them. And that was really difficult in the time of Greer's founding. There were a lot of reasons, I'll talk through a couple of them here, that what you would do is give the person a token of your affection. This was how you expressed your interest in them. And there was a movie I loved as a little kid. It was Apple Dumpling Gang with Don Knotts. And there's a scene in there where the little orphan girl comes up to Mr. Donovan, and Mr. Donovan's holding up this bejeweled pin. And she says, "What's that, Mr. Donovan?" And he says, "This is the token of a lady's affection." And then he loses it in a poker game. And the little girl says, "Why are you giving away your token of a lady's affection?" Okay, so giving a token of affection, common things were carved coins, where they would take a coin. This is a 1876 half dollar, and a jeweler would put a pin on the back, and then they would carve initials. But really one of the biggest, most common tokens that was given were these handmade cards, Valentines. There's a few things about this that are particularly important in understanding. You see, imagine a suitor who is in love, but his relationship looks like this. There's always a grumpy old chaperone beside you. Now, this painting shows a couple being very affectionate, physically close, which that means they had to be engaged. That would never have been allowed. But there was a social custom in which you do not talk about your relationship. Your relationship happens in writing. If you are serious, the chaperone is listening to your conversation. You talk about polite social topics. You don't talk about your relationship. And that made writing extremely important. However, writing had a problem, which was paper was very expensive. Paper was considered a luxury good. And so this is called cross-writing. It was extremely common. This is about the time of Greer's founding. Victoria Bailey writes a letter, and she writes one direction, and then she turns the page and writes the other direction, because paper, I looked it up, at the time of Greer's founding, paper cost, depending on how you do the math, roughly a day's wages to get about 75 sheets of paper. It's very expensive. And so to take a piece of paper and draft your expressions of love was serious. Like it's not as flippant as sending an email today. And there was another issue you need to be aware of as we get into this topic, and that is there was a sense of urgency that we don't feel today. Think about things like this. Life is relatively short for these people. People got married much younger than our culture today gets married. And back then you are celebrating every moment of life because people die very unexpectedly. You know, pneumonia kills you, whereas today pneumonia just means a little bit of round of antibiotics and you're fine. And so life is very short and tenuous, and you must pursue the relationship when you have the chance. So there's an urgency to it. And also, when Greer is founded, we are just a few years after the Civil War. Let me show you a Valentine from the Civil War. The front of the card has this picture of this soldier dodging a bullet, and inside it says, "A bull runner." His eyeballs glare, oh, what a stare, is on that human face divine. He runs, he's running back to me. Oh, hurry up, my Valentine. There is this sense of unprecedented loss of life, right? The Civil War is America's bloodiest war. And you have Valentine's Day after becomes even more sentimental, an opportunity to seize the day. And so they are pouring into handmade Valentine cards, taking this luxury of paper and spending time. And so imagine a suitor after a long day of labor, staying up at night, working by candlelight, drawing or weaving or folding or cutting a perfect Valentine, expressing their passion. Now, something did change this just a little before Greer's founding, and that was a young girl, 19 years old. She wasn't 19 in this picture, but a young girl named Esther Howland. She lived in Boston, and her father owned a printing company. And when she was 19, she got the idea that we could mass produce Valentines and sell them. And so she convinced her dad to buy a load of a specialty embossed paper. And she started making Valentines. They were a huge hit. She sold thousands on just opening shop. And so she got her friends to come, and they worked out of her attic at assembling Valentine's cards. These Valentine's cards are scarce and precious. There are collectors who pay thousands for them. So here's an example of one of Howland's Valentine cards. And this shifted the market. All of a sudden, you could buy something that, how many of you consider yourselves great artists that can make beautiful art like this? This allowed people to give their loves even finer things. Her things got very elaborate. Like this particular one, it's a fan that closes up, and so like a bouquet of flowers with, and if you look at the very top one, you see how there's a whole stack of cards behind it. There's many more of these fans, with each one with a little message, a little sentiment. Esther Howland solved another problem, which was if the only time you can express your feelings is in writing, what if you're not good at expressing your feelings in writing? And so Esther wrote a book called The Sentimental Valentine Writer for ladies and gentlemen, to teach you how to write. And so here's an example. Oh, could I hear thee once declare that fond affection lives for me? Oh, could I once delighted share the sweet return of love from thee? And I found a newspaper clipping of a Valentine's party that was being held in Greer at the Westmoreland's house, and it said who was invited, and it said what the refreshments were, and then it said the activity of the party was reading through her book, Learning How to Write Your Valentines. So, Valentines are being made and they're being bought and they're just beautiful. And in each Valentine, there are little hidden messages. This has a little hidden message at the top and a little hidden message at the bottom. And another thing develops during this time, and that is giving Valentines anonymously. Because if you can never talk about your relationship and you want to express something, but you're really scared of how they will react, you might give a Valentine anonymously. And it became really common to do that, which backfires. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, so you get a message. Let's say you get a card and it says, I love you, forget me not. And what if you get it from someone that you really don't care about at all? What do? You're not supposed to talk about your relationship. And so, let me just give you one example of what one young lady did. Some of you know about Audrey Davis. We've talked about her before. We have this collection of letters that she received, about 150, I'm calling them love letters. Some were more of that and some were a little less, general correspondence, but 150 love letters. But they came from 39 suitors between the ages of 15 and 53. The 53-year-old was a widower with 10 children wanting to marry her. She was 16. She did not marry him. She got 6 proposals in writing. Now, remember, you're not really supposed to talk about your relationship in this period culturally, so the proposal itself happens in writing. She got 6 proposals in writing. One of those she accepted and married. However, not the man she married. There was another man, the most ardent suitor of all of this, responsible for probably, I would guess, 20% of the letters. Carlos Easley. He is the son of Colonel Easley, that Easley, the town, is named after. And he is hot stuff. And he knows it. You can tell in his letters. He thinks highly of himself. He's quite a bit older than her. He first asked her on a date when he's 21 and she's 15, and she goes along with him. You see, Audrey had a problem. She was really, really kind. She was really sweet, and she could not tell somebody how she actually felt. And so these boys would write her and express great devotion and love, and she couldn't say no. And so she would lead them on and lead them on and lead them on. But inwardly, she was stewing about, what do I do? And with Carlos Easley, in her mind, she was getting all of this passionate advances of love. And she's like, no, I'm not interested in you. But she can't bring herself to say it. And so we see this thing start to develop in her letters, where she takes, here's a letter from him, and he signed it, yours devotedly. And he wrote his signature. And what she has done is she's taken ink and she saturated the paper with ink, and then she took a knife and scraped the damp fibers so his signature was gone. There is one place where he writes her a letter and he says, will you just tell me that you love me? And she writes on his letter, no, 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 no. But she can't bring herself to say it to him. And so it leads to, at age 20, this dilemma that he writes her and says, Audrey, we've got to have a decision. Like, I love you. I want to marry you. Please tell me you love me and that we can get married. And she finally writes him a letter and says, no. A year goes by. And then Carlos Easley sends her this letter. Miss Audrey Davis, mistress of Satan. All right, so I am going to pause for a shameless plug. We started the Greer Historical Society, and one of the things you get as a member is the Greer Historian magazine. And this issue has an article on Audrey Davis, Mistress of Satan, and her letters, and explains more about her. So join the Historical Society and get all of it. Okay, sales pitch over. So you have this dilemma that people are needing to figure out how to say, no, I'm not interested. And as a result, Esther Howland starts a second type of cards. They are beautiful cards, beautifully made. I'll get married, but not to you. I think you all know human nature. Human nature is not always this sweet and kind, right? And while Esther Howland's cards were beautiful, there were other publishers who made cards like this. There is a woman in the back and a snake wearing a top hat, and it says at the bottom, I'm not attracted by your glitter, for well I know how very bitter my life would be if I should take you for my spouse, a rattlesnake. Oh no, I'd not accept the ring, or evermore 'twould prove a sting. These came to be called vinegar cards. Now, I was just at home with my 90-year-old mother, and she said, give me the bullet points of your presentation. And I said, I'm going to talk about these things called vinegar cards. And she said, oh, we had vinegar cards. They were awful. And she's not wrong. So I'm going to show you some vinegar cards. And the starting point of these are cards where someone is expressing their affection for you and you're wanting to turn it away. But it soon became, I'm going to give you a card to critique you, to criticize you. So for instance, here was a vinegar card, picture of a young lady, and it says, Miss Vanity, you think yourself a picture, you are. A sketch in paint, which is what they called makeup. You work for hours before the glass to look like what you ain't. And this wasn't just for the girls. Here's one for a guy. They were called wolves, the guys that whistled at the girls, right? All decked out in suits and ties that nearly scream aloud. You flash a lady-killing smile and think you have 'em wowed. You think you're heaven's gift to every gal you see, but you're really just a two-bit chump, as corny as can be. Okay, I'm going to show you a few really quickly here. Show off. You claim you're good at anything, so come on, show some proof. And let me see how good you are at jumping off the roof. Dear Mr. Great I Am, you think you're a little tin Moses, such a pompous, important young guy. Anytime, any place that you open your face, it's always I. Now, remember I said Valentines were very commonly being given anonymously. Vinegar cards even more so. People are giving someone a Valentine's card saying, I'm not, and when your name is not signed, you feel like you can say more direct things, right? And it came to grow outside of relationships and to be given to other people in your community, like this one. Sales lady, as you wait upon the women with disgust upon your face, the way you snap and bark at them, one would think you owned the place. Or the lazy employee, sleepy dumbhead, shake your bones, wake up and do the chores. No one ever did succeed who always nods and snores. I can imagine a boss might have given that anonymously to a particular worker, but it worked both ways. Here's one to the big boss. You worship a nickel, you're grouchy all day. Ice water runs in your veins. You can't stand to see people smile when they work. Don't tell us you've got any brains. These started to be given to family members. Now, in some cases, it was like this. This woman with her ear to the keyhole, and it says, not a commendable method of gathering news. Parents often gave Valentines to their children. You probably have done that. And in this era, they started giving a loving Valentine and then a Valentine that was a little critique. And so an example of that: don't go to school with your hair uncombed and your dress untidy. Be neat. Now, that parent to that child was kind of loving and soft, but you remember my mom said hers were kind of intense. I'll show you that. But to give you the sense of scale here, in 1886, a large Valentine printing company in Boston, Massachusetts, made 5 million regular Valentines that year, and 15 million vinegar cards. So this is defining nature. Now, my mom described the vinegar cards that were passing around in the 1940s when she was seeing them. She said they were 8.5 by 11, and there were whole pads of them with all different kinds of people. And we went looking and we found them. So here's an example of what my mom saw. There is this ugly caricature at the top, and the words underneath say, "The beauty, eyes not mates and hair like carrots, nose and chin like any parrots. No doubt you think that face of thine will charm my heart, my Valentine." And these we found ones for the baker. It said, "My loaves have been getting lighter in weight each week. Please give me my money's worth again." There was one in 1918, for anyone in town who got one of those newfangled cars, automobiles. And it said, "You drive like a madman and you're safe up in the seat, but cats and dogs and children die beneath you," right? And so these are being given anonymously around town. Now, I ran across one of these that stood out to me in a particular way. I'm going to show it to you and then I'll explain why it stood out to me. It has these two people very amorous on a log, and it says, "In disgustingly bad taste. Are you too stupid and senseless to know that this sort of thing makes a sickening show? About spooning in private, I've nothing to say, but to do it in public proclaims you a jay." So I'm giving this to the couple that's being a little too amorous out in the public, right? When I saw this, I just laughed because in the theater exhibit in here, there's a couple of things that relate to each other. In the Grand Theater, which was Greer's first great theater, right beside Abbott's Custard, their little seating area, that alleyway, that was a theater. Opened in 1918, and they had a balcony, and in the balcony there are these plaster heads, and we've got one of them on our wall, a man and a woman, and they're kissing each other. And amorous young couples would go up into the balcony to watch movies together. And you can imagine what would happen. And so Charlie Drace, this guy, same guy we told the story, he started that theater, and then his son Bill ran it after that. They would go to couples and say, "Hey, cut it out." Well, they started hiring teenagers to be projectionists, and the projection booth was up in the balcony. So they started asking the projectionist to break up the couples. Well, these 16-year-old kids, they're not interested in that. So they got these cards printed up for the projectionist to hand out. And this is what the card, and we've got one on the wall back there. You can go see it. Not that. Oh, there's the Grand Theater. I lost track of my slides. Here it is. These cards they would hand out. "We think love is grand, but please do your petting in your parlor rather than in this theater, or we will have to ask you to leave." Okay, so we have vinegar Valentines, but then we have regular Valentines, of course. And the regular Valentines, you've all seen the loving ones, but there were some very odd ones. I showed you some in the pre-show slide. Some of you saw them, like the "I'll be burned up if you won't be my Valentine." There's one that I find just really too far. "I'll be sunk if you won't be my Valentine." And like, he's holding a gun to his head and like, this is serious stuff. The darkest one of all, "I love you to pieces." And then there were the lighthearted ones that were on themes. The vegetable theme was a really big deal. My heart beats for you. Let us be Valentines. I'd like to bring things to a head, so let us be Valentines. The one that I find oddest of that genre was the fish series. Holy mackerel, but I love you. I've been hearing a lot about you. I'm going to perch here till you're mine. Which is another way of saying I'm going to die if you don't date me. But all right, wartime led to a new type of Valentine. So this is World War I. To my Valentine, if you'll be my partner, I'll always be true and save the best dances for no one but you. From that same series, these are in the Library of Congress. He doesn't come to bite you, this little dog of mine, but simply to invite you to be my Valentine. Here was a World War I, a prayer and a kiss. On the magic wireless waves of love, I'm sending a kiss and a prayer to the God of us both up above, and a kiss for your lips over there. In our collection, we have a Valentine's card from World War II. A young wife to her husband, and this is the card she sent him. A Valentine for you. I know I ain't so purty, and my figure ain't so hot. And this here stuff the boys call oomph is something I ain't got. But if you think that there's a chance that I could make you happy, well, all I gotta say is, you can come and get me, Pappy. And you'll notice she signed it, love, guess who? Anonymous cards really were a thing. Even when you knew who they came from, you're still being a little coy about it. All right, so I want to close by going back to the early time in Greer and telling you two more love stories. Probably my personal favorite love stories I've run across in Greer's early history. Let's start with W. Burgess. This is one of Greer's greatest businessmen of all time. At the time this picture was taken, he was the richest man in Greenville County. He started Victor Mill, was the first president of Victor Mill. And I find it, as I study history, I see pictures like this and I see a name like W. Burgess, and I have a really hard time figuring out who's the person. Who is that? And it's a lot easier when you can see them as Will Burgess, a little boy. And I start to gain a little bit of understanding as I see pictures of them, and as he grows up and he's a young teen. And around the time of this photo, Will realizes that there's a girl he's grown up with who's really special. That girl is Etta Bailey. And Will gets up the courage to write Etta a note. And we have this note. It says, his writing's awful, by the way. Miss Etta, do you feel well enough to allow me the pleasure of coming to see you tonight? Hoping to see you out soon. I am your friend truly, W. Burgess. Okay, that was February 22nd, okay, 1886. We're in February 22nd. Let me show you what happens in their relationship. In April, he sends her this note. Let me come up and help plant your vines this afternoon. I'm coming up around 4 o'clock. Yours till the rope breaks, XYZ. Okay, what does yours till the rope breaks mean? Well, we don't know what it meant to them, but we know what it means to us. It means their relationship is such that they have phrases and names. What does XYZ signature mean? We don't know. However, when your relationship grows, you start having special connective bonds, and these are some of those. Okay, so that was April. Let's fast forward to August. And in August, Will Burgess, he is an enterprising young man. He starts a business at 16, and by this time, he's 21, and he's buying and selling cotton bales. And he started buying them down here and taking them just up into Asheville and Charlotte to sell, but he realizes there's a lot more money up in New England. So in August, he takes a trip up to New York City to find buyers for cotton. And so he writes her a letter, August 29th, and he opens it with, "My dear girl." September 1st, he writes her another letter, and it starts, "My darling Etta." And he says here, his writing's awful, so I'll just tell you. He says, "I wrote you once today and promised I'd write again, and I must keep my promise." So this is his second letter in one day, and he is literally writing a letter a day, and we have all of those letters. Ironically, funnily, whatever, she was not necessarily writing him back every day, but more than that, he's moving hotel to hotel up the coast, and her letters are often arriving late. So he's getting really worried, and he says things like, "Please write me. I haven't heard from you in 2 days. I'm just stressed about this." So September 1st, he's calling her my darling, and he's writing her twice a day. The next day, September 2nd, he writes, "I am almost crazy to see you, darling. And when I do see you, I will almost cry for joy." And then he explains what's going on inside him. By the way, that is just an outright statement of absence making the heart grow fonder, right? He's away and he's missing her. But there's more to it than that. He goes on to tell her, "Here in New York City, I ran across 2 South Carolina boys," which is marvelous, right? And he says, "The 3 of us went out sightseeing in New York City last night. And they saw," he says, "what would you highlight of a sightseeing tour of New York?" He says, "We saw the firehouse at the Brooklyn Bridge." Okay. And then he says, 3 Irish girls walked up to us. And he doesn't say it outright, but he makes it clear they are women offering services. And he says, "It was in that moment that I realized I want no one but you the rest of my life." So Will comes home, and Will and Etta get married. They end up having 3 children. The youngest one hadn't been born yet at the time of this picture. When their oldest son, Victor, the beanpole on the right, when he was 2 years old, they started Victor Mill and named it after their son. Can you imagine being this kid growing up in town with a mill named after you? That had to be awkward. Little Margaret here, her grandson is a volunteer at the museum, which is kind of cool. There's something funny about W.W. Burgess. He was 5'4". And so as this very successful businessman, he was always self-conscious about his height. And every photograph of him, you see where he's standing. And it didn't help that Etta was an extremely tall woman. See how tall she is? He's on 3 steps, and he's just a little head and shoulder above her. So every picture of him, he's standing higher or sitting up in a carriage with a horse and the other people on the ground. It's just, he was very particular about that. There's one other story, a relationship from early Greer that I want to share with you. And a few of you, I know 2 of you in here have heard part of this before, so I'm sorry. But it's my favorite love story in Greer's early days. Etta Bailey's mom, Victoria Bailey. Here's a picture of her at about the point she's Etta's mom in that last picture. She was Victoria Cunningham before she got married to Mr. Bailey. Victoria Cunningham, imagine with me her life. She is born and raised on a farm on the corner of Old Buncombe and Brushy Creek. There is right now there the DeShields little, they have a barn that they sell produce out of on Saturdays. That's Victoria's home place. She's born and raised there. And just up the road at Pleasant Hill, where Pleasant Hill Church is now, there's a little community, Pleasant Grove. There's this little community called Pleasant Grove. And there lives in Pleasant Grove a man that she calls the widower. This man is William Bailey. He's 9 years older than her. So when she's, 18, he's 27. She's not remotely thinking about a relationship at all. And William Bailey gets married, and he marries this girl named Annie, and they were like made for each other. Their perfect relationship. And a year after their wedding, they have a baby daughter. And both mom and baby survive the birth, which is saying something, right? And the family is happy. And a month after the baby's born, Annie came to William and said, "I don't feel well. And that afternoon, she died, just out of the blue. So the widower is left with an infant, and a year later, the infant gets pneumonia and dies. So Victoria is in this community. They go to church together. They both went to Mount Tabor Presbyterian Church. William is calling back. It's all right. It's all right. So Victoria she knows him, this older man in her church who's gone through this tragedy. She's a little sensitive to it because her older sister had the same happen in reverse. Her husband died right early in marriage. And so she knows of this man, but there's no relationship. At 18, she starts writing to her sister, and on May 9th of 1862, she writes this letter. I noticed the cross writing on her luxury of paper, and she writes this phrase, "I have just returned from a visit to Marietta, accompanied by a widower and others." Now, she could have said, "I just returned from Marietta with a group of people." She could have said, "I returned from Marietta with these people," and named them all. But she chose to say, "with a widower and some others." So something is happening, right? We have our first indication that something is happening. On June 19th of that year, she writes another letter, and she says in this letter, "You said something about a widower." I can hardly think, who are you talking about? Although, now that you mention it, there is a widower in town, and he's gone on a visit to the coast, and Mr. Wood invited him, and they went down, and he talks highly of Miss Hetty. She is the cook down on the coast. He's been on Okay, so she denies knowing who her sister is asking about, while knowing all of the details of this man's life and travels. And then there are 2 years where she doesn't mention the widower. Notice, she's never mentioned him by name yet. She just calls him the widower. 2 years of silence, no mention. And then we come to this moment, January 30th of 1865. And with indignation, Victoria writes her sister, "Please tell me who you heard say I was going to marry a widower. You can tell the person it is not true. Most positively, there is nothing but friendship existing between us." And the very next letter her sister gets from her says this: "I suppose you have heard that I've connected my destiny with that of Mr. W.C. Bailey's. I acted from my own feelings, and I hope I never will regret the step that I have taken, feeling assured that I have a loving and affectionate husband. So what doth hinder me from being perfectly happy?" Now, I told you, I just came back from Reno. My father's on hospice. He's 89, and my mom is 90, and she caretakes for him. She is a machine. And I captured this picture that my mom didn't know I took. And let me explain what you're looking at. My dad in the hospital bed in the living room, and my mom, he's asleep taking a nap, and my mom went over, and she just bent over and watched him. My brother's here. He knows her face. You can't really see it. She has this look of just deep love. And I think, as Victoria wrote, what hinders me from being perfectly happy? The reality is, we all know life is hard, but that relationship is one that through the hardship is what brings happiness and joy. And so I close with this. So what hinders you from being perfectly happy? Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for coming today.